Currently, it's summer here in my hometown of Mobile, Alabama, and something we talk about quite often when it comes to exercise is the heat. In summer down here, we talk about the heat pretty much all the time, but heat and also humidity. And I've spoken before about heat acclimation or training or exercising in heat and how you should kind of train yourself for that and how you can exercise in those conditions. But I haven't really talked about what does that do to you? What are the effects of heat and humidity on your training, and how does acclimating it, what does it actually do? How does it actually improve your performance? So I thought we'd do a deeper dive today, especially because of what I've got going on in my own training, about heat acclimation, humidity acclimation, and how it can improve your performance today on the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast.
Welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast
with Garrett Williamson.
Health, wellness, exercise, nutrition, and a whole lot more. Got questions? Call us and leave a message at 251-278-EDGE or message us at Personal Edge Fitness on Facebook and Instagram, at Team PE on Twitter, or personaledgefitness.com.
Good day and welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Garrett Williamson. I'm president of Personal Edge Fitness. Thank you again for joining us on the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast, dispelling the myths of health, fitness, and wellness. Now, before I dive into this topic, and it's rather near and dear to my heart right now because of what I've got going on in my own training, I also want to tell you how to get in touch with the show in case you have any questions about this podcast or any others. Please contact me at area code 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can also reach me at my email address, which is garrett@personaledgefitness.com. Personaledgefitness.com, of course, is our website. You can contact us there. You can also contact us at our Facebook page, which is Personal Edge Fitness. Hit me up on X at Team PE if you are so inclined. Let me tell you why I'm doing this particular podcast. It happens to have something to do with my training. And as I was training and thinking about it and working on aspects of my own training, it brought me to my favorite question, which is why or how. What does it exactly do? You know, I've talked to you about this on the podcast before. You hear things like, water can make you lose weight. Well, how? Why? I've done podcasts on exactly what happens on that. Well, I really want to dive deeper into heat acclimation. And actually what that does, what happens in your body, and what are the mechanics that happen that actually improve your performance or allow you to train or exercise or to feel more comfortable in that kind of environment. Full disclosure and why I'm talking about this today and why does it have something to do with my own training. Well, I actually am leaving next month to compete in my 11th World Championships for Team USA in multisport racing. Now, multisport racing, many people know of a triathlon, and that's a multisport racing, several sports, 3 different sports involved. But there's a huge array of multisport training, and there's a large number of competitions that happen on the national and international level in multisport. You can have all kinds of things from even involving mountain biking and kayaking and what have you. But the ones that most people are familiar with, of course, are triathlon, the run, bike, swim event. I've done that. I've actually competed for Team USA in sprint triathlon, competed at nationals, and then a race for Team USA and quite a few world championships in sprint triathlon. But it's not my only one, and it's not my favorite. There's another competition that I competed in called aquabike, and that is a swim bike event. There are different distances for all these. There's like triathlon, there's sprint triathlon, there's intermediate, there's or the Olympic division they call it. There's a half Ironman, Ironman. In aquabike, there are different levels. There's a sprint aquabike, there's an intermediate aquabike. The one that I am competing in and happens to be my most favorite is called the aquathlon. A lot of people say aquathon, and that's becoming more accepted as the way to pronounce that word. But it's actually aquathlon, and that is a done correctly. Well, I shouldn't say correctly. When you have warm water and don't use a wetsuit, the race is performed as a run, swim, run event, just like a duathlon. Duathlon, typically, there's several different types of duathlons, but the most common, of course, is a run-bike event where it's a run-bike-run event. This is an aquathlon. It's the only one that the distance is competed right now. There probably are longer distance aquathlons. This particular one happens to be a 2.5K run with a 1,000-meter swim in the middle of it, and then a 2.5K run. When it's a cold weather or cold water event, they do it as a 1,000-meter swim and a 5K. So obviously this event that I'm competing in is a 5K split in half with a 1,000-meter swim. It happens to be my favorite. My favorite event, all of multisport, favorite sport is swimming, and this happens to favor not only abilities, but it also happens to favor my lifestyle because the training for it, you don't have to train in the third sport. You can use that as cross-training, And also, very selfishly, it's one I can do carry on when I travel worldwide. I don't have to actually haul my bike around, though that is convenient because if you have a bike case, you can bring a lot of things back in that, which is kind of neat. So I'm actually have the privilege, the pleasure and privilege and honor for that matter, to compete in my 11th World Championship for Team USA at the ITU World Multisport Championships, which is going to be held in Townsville, Australia. I'm looking forward to this event because I feel like compared to some of the European racers, I will actually have an advantage. Now, the Aussies will definitely have an advantage. Many of them not train in that climate, but many of them train at this actual place where we'll be racing. So they'll obviously have a course advantage and temperature and environment advantage. But I'm trying to train and make sure that I have as much advantage as I possibly can. Obviously, my racing, my swimming, making sure my transitions go quickly, making modifications to my first run. I'll actually run my first run most likely definitely with my goggles because they will act as my sunglasses, my swim goggles, and probably wear my swim cap if I can handle it with the heat because then I don't have to put those on in transitions. That's one advantage. But another advantage is climate. And whenever I have a race like one of these coming up, I always go and look at the almanac for the particular area where I'll be training and check out temperatures and then try to put myself into that type of temperature. If it's going to be colder water, I have an opportunity. There's a place I can swim in North Alabama where I try to do that and do some wetsuit swimming if I need to. This one particular one happens to be heat. And I had one that was probably the closest to our environment here in Mobile. In 2016, I raced in Cozumel, Mexico. I was ready for the heat and ready for the humidity. It was actually a little bit hotter, but I trained in very similar conditions. This one's a little different. Actually, I am training right now in an environment of somewhere between 87 degrees and 91 degrees, sometimes a little bit higher, and a humidity somewhere between 77% and 86% humidity. Now, we call that Tuesday here in July here in Mobile, but most people refer to that as very high humidity. Even we would refer to that as very high humidity and high temperatures. You've heard of the heat index before, and that is, what does the temperature actually feel like? And at today's current temperature is 87 degrees. They say the heat index makes it feel like it's 102. So somewhere in the heat index range, I'm training somewhere between 102 and like 106, even 110 as far as heat is concerned. I will be traveling to Townsville and competing in an environment of 66 degrees to 80. In fact, their record temp on the day that I'll be racing is actually 82. So it's a lower temperature. Humidity is still pretty high. It's 77 to 84% humidity. But the heat index where I'll be traveling, just a reminder, in Mobile, I'm training in somewhere between a heat index of 102 to 110. I'll actually be competing in somewhere between 71 and 87. And that's substantial. That's going to feel, 30 degrees, that's 29, 25 to 30 degrees lower temperature. You're going to feel that. That's going to be a big difference. I thought if I was training in a higher heat, higher humidity, and was acclimated for that, where I could actually race and was gauging my times in how I was doing, how fast was I running, how fast was I swimming, how fast was the overall race, in that higher temperature, higher humidity, or high humidity and higher temperature and higher heat index, that would give me an advantage. I just generally assumed. But I thought about it. I said, well, I'm making an assumption, and I don't know if that's actually correct. So I dove deeper into this to look into acclimation and what actually happens. Okay, definition of heat acclimation. Heat acclimation is a process by which the human body undergoes physiological adaptations to better cope with high temperatures. Garrett, that makes sense. But the key to that is the physiological adaptations. Your body literally does adapt. And so what are the mechanisms of heat acclimation? Well, heat acclimation induces several physiological changes in the body, including, and these are probably the four most important. Number one is increased sweat rate. Increased sweat rate, you're going to sweat more. Obviously, you're going to increase your sweat rate, and you're going to train your body to fire off and get that sweat rate going quicker and higher volume. What does sweat do? It actually enhances the cooling of your body by the sweat coming to the surface and then evaporating off the body. So it's actually heat leaving the body, cooling the body down. Number two is a lowered core temperature. This reduces the risk of heat-related illness. This is why you can take a very highly competitive, fantastic triathlete, the twin brothers from Britain, the Brownlee brothers, they're named. They were the number one and number two triathletes in the world in 2016. And one of the Brownlees actually was going to place, may have won it, was going to place probably top three. And within 20 yards of the finish line, he actually just became almost hysterical and collapsed. Had a couple of racers pass him. His brother came up and actually picked him up and dragged him off, and literally, if you go back and look at it, threw him across the finish line. And what had happened, the heat had gotten to him. He had been training in Britain or training in other places. He had not fully acclimated to that high heat, high humidity. Had nothing to do with his overall performance. It had to do with this fact that he just wasn't ready for the heat. Number 3, improved cardiovascular function. And this is increased plasma volume and improves blood flow to skin and muscles. All right, plasma volume. What are we talking about here? Did a deeper dive into this just so you explain. So I sort of understand plasma volume, but I wanted to explain just briefly, not getting too technical about that. Plasma volume is the liquid component of the blood that plays a crucial role in exercise performance due to its impact on various physiological functions. And here's some key ways that it does. It improves cardiovascular function by affecting your blood volume. It increases stroke volume and cardiac output, and that is how much blood your heart is able to actually pump out. And what do you need during this time? You need energy. And so energy is basically transferred, is taken around the body through your blood. And one of the things that is very important is oxygen. I say many times that oxygen equals energy. And so your capacity of taking a lot of oxygen actually will lower your heart rate and increase your energy level. That's why when you sprint, you breathe so much. You start huffing and puffing, as they say. That is your cardiovascular system, your lungs, and the cardiopulmonary system too. Full cardiopulmonary, your heart and your lungs, trying to get more oxygen into your body. And so that if you increase that stroke volume, you can increase that energy going throughout your body. Thermoregulation, in other words, regulating your heat dissipation. You can actually increase that through increasing plasma volume. It also enhances your sweating. That's part of thermoregulation. The hydration and electrolyte balance. If you're increasing your stroke volume or increasing your plasma volume, then you're going to increase that hydration getting through your body and cooling things off or using it where it's needed throughout the body. And also fluid balance. And then back to the last one being oxygen transport. What I was saying earlier about your energy is transferred through your body, through your blood, and increases your energy level by getting more oxygen to the different parts of the body. The other thing it does is metabolic waste removal, and this is the clearance of byproducts. As you start breaking down muscle tissue, you give off byproducts that your body wants to get rid of. And increasing your plasma volume will increase your metabolic waste removal. And of course, it also helps in recovery. But back to the mechanisms of heat acclimation, I kind of diverted when I went to improve cardiovascular function, talking about plasma volume. But just to recap, mechanisms of heat acclimation: increased sweat rate, lowered core temperature, improved cardiovascular function. And the last one is reduced sodium loss. Reducing your sodium loss is extremely important. Sodium gets a bad rap because we think of sodium being attributed to high blood pressure and what have you, but you need sodium in your body. You have to have it. If you've ever been outside exercising or exerting, however, and you're drinking a lot of water, what have you, you start to get a headache, this dull headache. A lot of times that can actually be caused because of so much water and less sodium. And the reason you get that headache is your brain literally swells and starts putting pressure on your cranium, and that's why you end up getting a headache. Having that sodium in there helps draw that water away from swelling in your different organs. And so sodium is extremely important. It is one of the key, I would say it's number one, electrolyte, that and potassium, electrolyte that you need during exercise. There's a lot of hype out there about electrolytes. And electrolytes are important. Don't get me wrong, they're very important. But there's so much hype about it because there's a lot of products that have electrolytes in them. And, of course, people are trying to hawk the need for electrolytes and sell these items. So they create a lot of fear associated with electrolytes. The reason I say that is that when I've talked to people about increasing their intake of water, one of the first things they say, well, it'll wash out all your electrolytes. No. Through normal everyday activities, no, you're not going to. And if you're eating regular, then you're not going to wash out your electrolytes by taking in the recommended daily allowance of water, which is 100 ounces. In these extreme conditions, that's where it's important to take in electrolytes. For instance, in this race, which should be 50 minutes or under for a highly trained athlete, hopefully in my case it's going to be under 45 minutes and maybe lower than that. It's intense. It's not very long. That may seem like long, but it really isn't compared to an Ironman, which can take hours. This is an under an hour event. But in those extreme conditions, I'll, of course, hydrate well before the event, but shortly there before the event, and if I'm able to during the event and definitely afterwards, I will be drinking some sort of fluid that has electrolytes in it. That can be a Gatorade, a Powerade, an electrolyte additive. I happen to like using a powdered additive in my water bottle, which is always near and dear, and sometimes it's flavored and adds electrolytes. In my high intensity training, I actually do that. So anyway, those mechanisms, that's what they do. They increase sweat weight, they lower the core temperature, improving your cardiovascular function, and reducing sodium loss. There are several methods that are involved with heat acclimation. But actually, I'm going to get to that in just a second. But also, particularly in my case here, I'm actually going to be training and be prepared, acclimated for a higher temperature. Probably the same humidity rate, depending on what humidity we have that actual day. It may actually be lower than what I've been training in. But let's say it's the same. Either way, I will be training, my body will be more conditioned for a higher heat, which will actually give me an athletic advantage over those that may be like the Aussies that are trained for that particular area. I'll actually have a slight advantage because I've been training in a higher heat. So my core temperature will be lower, used to being lower and what have you. My sweat rate will be prepared for a lot heavier task than what I'm going to experience. Cardiovascular function, sort of like almost like training at altitude. You increase your red blood cells training at altitude. That's why you've probably heard of blood doping. People that train at high altitudes, they increase higher concentration of red blood cells. They'll actually pull them out of the body, and just before the race, they go to a lower altitude and actually reintroduce those red blood cells to give them an advantage. Red blood cells help you with oxygen transfer, and so they'll feel like Superman at a lower altitude. In this case, I'm training from going from a higher temperature to training in a lower temperature, and so my cardiovascular function will be trained even better than the conditions I'll be in. My sodium loss should be less. I'll still use the same electrolytes. I won't be overdoing it with electrolytes, but I'll be more than used to this. This will actually it'll feel cooler to me. The water temperature definitely will. I'm training in water temperature that's in its 80s or mid to high 80s, and I'll be in water temperature that's in the 70s. And so it'll actually, I'll get a little bit of heat from that first 2.5K. When I plunge into the water, it's going to feel relaxing almost because of being that highly acclimated. There's ways that you can actually train yourself for or become acclimated to the heat. And this is for anybody. This is for anybody that lives in or is traveling to a higher temperature, a higher humidity, or for those of us that are in Alabama here in South Alabama. I've talked about this before on a podcast, how you want to expose yourself to it and get slowly acclimated. And here's a way of doing it. Progressive heat exposure is one of the number one way, and that's duration and intensity. Start with a moderate to intensity exercise in heat for 20 to 60 minutes per day, and you gradually increase that duration over 1 to 2 weeks. So don't do it, usually about 10%, 10 to 15% change in your duration as the time goes by, week to week, in order to slowly acclimate yourself for it, so you don't go out and just pass out or have any kind of ill effects from being in the heat. If you slowly train yourself to it, if you continue to do that, no matter what temperatures we have in South Alabama, it starts getting really, really warm end of April, May, and then by August, September, it's extremely hot. But if you're progressively making those changes, you continue training in that heat, you will easily acclimate for it. Hydration strategies, extremely important. Maintaining adequate hydration first and foremost before. You want to hydrate before you need it. You want to make sure the body is hydrated prior to going out in that heat. So in the morning, making sure you're downing a good volume of water. In my particular case, and everybody's different, in my particular case, I'm going to have, I'll actually race at 8 a.m. So I will have a good, at minimum, 50 ounces of water. If not more, on board. And my urine will actually be almost clear. It'll be a little bit affected because I'll have some electrolyte intake, but I'll be very well hydrated. I'll be thinking well, feeling good, energy level will be good prior to the exercise. And then I have a water bottle. I have a water bottle in my transition station. I'll most likely hit it just before the swim, or definitely right after the swim and before my last run. I'll make sure just topping off the fluids, making sure I stay hydrated. Clothing adjustments. This is very obvious. You want to wear light colored clothing in a higher heat environment. But also, most people think of, well, I want to rip off clothing and get down to as least amount of clothing. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Yes, that will expose the body, allowing the sweat to evaporate, possibly evaporate quicker. But if you have garments that have more of a wicking effect and help pull that water off your body, believe it or not, that garment will actually become wet, and it actually acts as a cooling effect. There are a lot of good hydrating material out there. Believe it or not, cotton, it becomes soaked, it becomes damp, but it actually has a cooling effect on you. So if you have a choice of whether or not to wear a T-shirt in those situations, this is why you see a lot of people that are out fishing and out in incredible heat, and they're wearing these long-sleeve sun shirts. They're protecting themselves from the sun, first and foremost, but it's actually creating a cooling effect to the body. So, and then monitoring it, monitoring core temperature, heart rate, perceived exertion. You can do this through your Apple Watch. You can do it through I have a Garmin. I can actually do it through my Garmin, and I can go back and look. How is my heart rate responding to this? Where is it spiking? What is it spiking to? And as I train, it's actually something I look at, especially in my second run, where my highest maximum heart rate is, and if as I train it's starting to come down. Because I can do that, one thing from training, through sprint work, through increasing frequency, intensity, or time of the training. But also I can do it through hydration. I can do it through the foods that I eat. I can do it through clothing. Do it through breathing techniques that you can lower your heart rate. Because remember what I said before about why you huff and puff, why that cardiopulmonary system is working so high, is trying to get that oxygen to your body. And so if you increase your breathing techniques, do things like after a sprint workout, after a sprint, a set that I do, and a rep I do, and then I'm taking a break, I will do what's called over breathing. I will enhance. I won't just barely breathe. I will really overdo it for 3 or 4 breaths, trying to get more oxygen into my body. I'll even do that constantly through the transition, almost to the point of hyperventilation, because I'm trying to get as much oxygen. And if you do that, it's amazing. You do that, you'll watch your heart rate actually drop a lot faster, and that'll help you deal with that. So there's several studies that I always like to back everything up with studies, but there was a study that came out in the Journal of Sport Medicine. This was done in 2013, and it was called The Effects of Heat Acclimation on Physiology, Performance, and Exercise Heat Tolerance. And they found that the study demonstrated that a 10-day heat acclimation protocol significantly improved endurance performance and thermoregulation, your body's ability to deal with heat, in trained athletes. The participants showed lower core temperatures and heart rates during exercise in heat compared to non-acclimated athletes. That's pretty obvious. So there's another study that actually came out in the Scandinavian Journal of Medicine and Sports Science, and this was back in 2015. This research found that heat acclimation improved cardiovascular stability and reduced thermal strain. So whenever you get overheated, that affects your cardiovascular system, and that's what they call thermal strain. And this acclimation led to, of course, enhanced performance and reduced fatigue. It has a lot to do with your recovery. If you're zapping all your nutrients out, and especially your water, you're getting completely hydrated after a race or an exertion, you don't go to the bathroom for a long time because you have no fluids whatsoever. Well, that's going to cause a lot of damage, and it's also going to cause you to be very, very, very sore. And why is it going to cause you to be sore? Well, you've broken down the same amount of muscle tissue, whether you were hydrated or not, if the exertion is the same, but your body wasn't able to repair. And as soon as I finish that race, even during the race, my body will start trying to repair everything. Well, it needs fluid for that. If it doesn't have fluid, that's why I'd be even more sore the next day. So I get a massage afterwards and hydrate. So that's what that study found. In a third study, this was actually called the Integrated Physiological Mechanisms of Exercise Performance Adaptation and Maladaptation to Heat Stress. And this came out in the Journal of Comprehensive Physiology in 2011. This study highlighted that heat acclimation increased what we were talking about earlier, plasma volume and sweat rate, leading to better maintenance of electrolyte balance and hydration status during exercise. Obviously, the things that you're going to experience through acclimation is enhanced performance, reduced risk of heat-related illness, and improved recovery. Now, selfishly, I chose this topic because of what I'm involved in right now, but it does affect you. If you're going to the lake somewhere, you're going to the beach for the summer or what have you, you're going for a vacation, acclimating yourself, taking a little time, start planning. It's kind of neat. If you're planning on a vacation, go ahead and start kind of tuning up for your vacation. It'll get you excited about it. But about 10 days out, start doing that heat acclimation. Put yourself into a hotter environment. Start those hydration techniques. And believe it or not, it'll make your vacation a lot more fun. And if you're exercising, well, you don't have to avoid the heat. You just have to, obviously, acclimate for it. If you have any questions about this, again, reach out to me at 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can also reach me at Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com. That's our website, Facebook page. Hit me up on X at Team PE if you are so inclined. Don't avoid it. Don't be scared of it. Don't believe this nonsense that you can't be out in that heat. Yeah, you can. Just have to train for it. Just have to plan for it. And planning for it and acclimating for it and enjoying it is just one more way we help you reach your level of wellness. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast with Garrett Williamson. Subscribe now and be a part of the show by calling 251-278-EDGE or message us on Facebook and Instagram at Personal Edge Fitness or at Team PE on Twitter, and visit us at personaledgefitness.com.